Greetings and welcome to Legacies of Wavryn, Lore of the Endelment. This will be chapter 15 of this reading. Six hours of training passed by, with me fighting a shadowy entity of my former self. At the same time, Blight was constantly coaching me every other attack. To me, that was very annoying, because it wasn't really coaching, more like just insulting, but that was as best it was going to get with him. At first, he barked, "Come on, you're sucking at this. Stop sucking at this. You need to suck less at this, and suck more on not sucking, and, well, just stop sucking at this. I don't want to have to say you sucked at not sucking at this. That'll just suck. Bring your suckiness on this down a peg." From there, he just went to barking random riddles. Tac created another entity of me, which changed this from training to being just an annoying 2 against 1 brawl. The shadowy entities of myself were to help me progress in all-around combat, strength, speed, agility, and intelligence. Not only was it helping me in those stats, it was also training my spirit so it could hold more and stronger energy. The training was like trying to outmatch myself. But fighting myself, with myself having myself as a partner, I myself thought that was far too much. It was like kicking my own ass. To my surprise, the first entity actually felt like it was me fighting. However, the second one made things a lot harder. I couldn't keep up with them. Yet no matter how hard I would fall, I would always pick myself up for another swing. That was how my brothers and I were taught to be in combat. That was what made the Shero family number 1 in rank of others, while also the only good thing Father ever taught me. When things got out of hand, my brothers and I always tried to fight our way through it. Even if it meant we could lose our lives, we still pushed on. Sometimes, though, we would just get stupid and complain about it if it was getting on our nerves. After a minute of fighting against the 2 shadow entities in the air, I back-kicked the second one in the face with my right heel. In the same motion, it made me bounce off of it into a backflip that pushed me about 20 feet from them. I purposely dropped to the ground to place my feet down, keeping my focus on the entities. As the 2 calmly floated down to the ground, staring at me with their full ball black eyes, I yelled, "What the fuck's up with you? I can't fight 2 of these things by myself. They never tire out." Blight randomly and quickly yelled, "Who has the might to crush your will?" "Quit bitching and just do it," Tac yelled. "If you destroy them, I'll let you rest for about a minute. It walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 in the evening. Why, you little..." Before I could finish yelling at Tac, one of the entities tried to kick me with its left foot. However, I dodged it by leaning back slightly, then raised myself to punch it with my right fist, which it blocked with ease. As it blocked my fist with the side of its right shin, the other entity came up to my right side and quickly punched me in the ribs. The first entity then quickly lowered its leg and spun around to kick me in the left side of my head with its right foot, breaking my glasses. My awesome glasses. Shortly afterwards, the 2 of them beat me up between each other, just like what Zaec and I would do in our fights together against an enemy. Tac placed his right hand on his forehead, while shaking his head slightly and said, "Oh, Creator, some Endelment. I'll never learn at this rate." Blight, once again, randomly yelled, "You must throw me before I can knock them down." "Wow," Fox said, sitting next to Wolf's left side as Bunny sat at Wolf's right. "That must suck." "Poor Papa," Bunny said. "He's getting beaten up." "Never thought I'd see the day," Wolf said. Quickly as he placed his hand back down, Tac glanced over at Bunny, then me, then at Wolf, clearly confused. Fox noticed this and knew that the Kexan was confused as to why Bunny called me Papa, while also unable to understand how a rabbit alicans comes from between a canine alicans and a Kexan. Even if Wolf was part rodent, her daughter still wouldn't have turned out so defined to that bit of her DNA. While still focused on the fight, more or less a beatdown, Fox said, "No, he's not really her father, and no, she's not really her mother. Bunny just thinks that because they were the ones who raised her." Tack looked back up at the fight and said, "Huh, weird." Again, Blight randomly yelled, "What can brighten your day but blacken your night?" They all watched me get beaten up for a few more seconds. Then Tack yelled, "Let's go, Endelment. You can't hope to contain darkness if your body's not fit for it. Destroy them." Bunny glanced up at the Kexan and asked, "Why do you call Papa Endelment?" He glanced down at my daughter with a smirk, then just continued to watch the fight, leaving her question unanswered. She looked over at Wolf to see if she would answer, but Wolf just shrugged her shoulders. Though Wolf acted as if she didn't know, she really just didn't care, which Fox knew because she giggled. So with that, Bunny continued to watch me, unknown as to what was really going on. The two entities quickly kicked me in the stomach and threw me 10 feet away, where I crashed into the ground. I just laid there in pain and stared up at the sky, struggling to even lay there, as I painfully said, "Tack, you bastard." While floating around in a figure 8 pattern over my head, Blight randomly said, "To some, I am a ball. To others, I am light. But only those of rule can put me together. Hate you, Blight." The ball of energy stopped as I struggled to pick myself up. I then took off my coat, it now completely torn to shreds, afterwards putting myself into my fighting stance. Almost instantly, both of the shadow entities teleported and punched me in the face simultaneously, mirroring one another. The force they used sent me straight back, 4 feet off the ground and 20 feet away without falling. They then teleported before I could begin to lower, rapidly and senselessly beating me again. After a minute of that, I finally grew angry and shouted, "Enough!" I did a quick left spin barrel roll to kick one entity with my right foot, slamming my boot into its head. I placed my feet down, only to roundhouse kick the other entity with my left foot, striking the right side of its head hard before it had a chance to defend. Within a split second, both entities flew about 10 feet from me, yet also were ground into the dirt head first for about another 12 feet before being buried and disappearing. No care to the situation, Blight randomly yelled, "What am I if I am blunt and live in a cave?" As I stood in my fighting position, I grinned my teeth and growled in hatred, baring my fangs. I was fed up with that fight. I wanted to win, and I was going to do so with whatever I had in my powers. Tack clapped his hands slowly and said, "Very good, Endelment. Now, take a moment while I..." He stopped and examined me from a distance, closely paying attention to the scene. My body had changed back into its darkness form, but it was different from the last time. I had 6 foxtails that were each 4 feet long, with fur around them that was stretched 2 feet. Each tail was flailing around wildly, as if to show that I was very agitated. They couldn't be more right. The white tips on my fur and in my normal hair had changed to black, as did my fangs, with everything else being the usual from the first time I changed. "Well," Tack said in amazement, "he's progressed farther than I thought for someone at his level." He then turned to Wolf and asked, "Tell me, how long has he had darkness in his possession?" Still keeping her concentration on me, Wolf replied, "He got it about 4 days ago. Only used it once ever since then, and went from having 1 tail to 2 within that same day. That's what I was told anyways." Shocked, Tack quickly turned back to me in fear and said, "What?" I stood up straight and looked over at the Kexan to read his mind, which continued with, "No. Impossible. No one has been able to progress that fast, not even death. and it took him several millenniums to just obtain his power, let alone control it. "What's wrong?" I asked in my two-tone voice, giving a slight smirk. "Do I scare you? You poor thing." I gave a sinister chuckle, then jolted towards Tak to stand just a foot away, making him gasp. I gazed at him with wild eyes and an evil grin, laughing to the reaction I got from the Kexan, then said, "Come now, I couldn't have scared you that badly, could I?" Blight flew around my head once, then moved to Bunny to hover over her right shoulder to keep from getting killed by me. I know that's what he believed. He wouldn't have if he knew his life wasn't in danger. Once near my daughter, Blight threw out one last riddle and asked, "Why not to be something that makes you feel better?" Terrified, Tak tried to ask, How did you..." Before he could finish, I tried to strike him with my right-hand claws. However, a black foxtail struck up from underground in between us to protect the Kexan. At the same time, a second one struck up from underground as well, next to Tak's left side, and tried to hit me. I stopped from attacking the Kexan and also dodged the second tail by jolting back about 100 feet, stopping by leaning down and grabbing the ground with my right hand to grind my claws into the dirt. A man in another suit showed up by walking around from behind Tak and over to the Kexan's right side, while holding his hat down over his eyes with his right hand. The tails that struck up reverted back into the ground. Then the man adjusted his hat onto the top of his head to reveal himself. When I noticed who it was, I snarled as I stood somewhat hunched over. Death kept his eyes on me and asked his colleague, "You alright?" He's insane," Tak said. "He completely skipped 4 stages without even using his powers, without even concentrating." "Interesting. How many times has he used it beforehand?" "Once," Tak replied, slightly calming down. Death quickly glanced over at his friend, then looked back at me and said, "Very interesting. How many entities of himself has he destroyed?" "He was fighting 2, but all he did was knock them out, not really fatal blows. Still made them retreat." I gave a loud growl at Death and tried to walk towards him, but one of his tails stopped me. It struck upwards in front of me from underground, but before it could touch me, I jumped back a few feet and snarled at him again. My 7th foxtail then quickly split out, and my entire body transformed into a black fox, 3 times the size of a normal one. Death reverted his tail again as he said, "Oh dear, he's really progressing, isn't he?" Noticing what I had done, Tak became irritated and said, "Ah, crap." Bunny glanced over at the 2 Kexans, confused, and asked, "What's wrong?" From this stage forward, everybody goes berserk and attacks anything they see at random, while doing it at impossible speeds that nearly match teleportation. Death placed a barrier over himself and the others just by snapping his right-hand fingers. Then Tak continued, "At the same time, he won't listen to anything we have to say. We'll just have to wait for him to continue through his stages on his own." In my wild state, I would glance around aimlessly, then lock my eyes on something that I felt like hating for no real reason. I'd growl at it for about 5 seconds, then jolt over to it and either headbutt it real hard or grab it with my teeth and rip it apart as hard and as fast as I could, with whipping my head back and forth. I tried striking the others, but the barrier protected them, so I just went to ignoring them as I continued destroying the rest of the place. While I did my mindless rampage, everyone else just calmly watched me as Death said, "If he continues at this rate, he'll have his powers under control in no time. Quite fascinating." "What do you mean by that?" Fox asked. "How long does this usually take?" "Well, it usually takes 25 years for Kexans to control their darkness once they've obtained it. But with Kexans, it should only take about a year or 2 to control it once they've obtained it. In this place, though, years are equal to days. He's progressing a lot faster than anyone else ever has, Tak added. He's jumped a few of his main stages. However, this place keeps him from using most of his powers so that he doesn't up and run off from his training once he gets like this. Wolf, Bunny, and Fox stood up, continuing to watch me, while Wolf placed her hands on her hips and asked, "Are you sure?" Both Kexans looked at the Alikins, confused, while she continued, "Because Ray finds ways to surprise those that don't know him very well, even if he doesn't mean to." Now surprised, the Kexans glanced at each other, then looked to Bunny just as she placed her hands behind her and said, "Yeah, Papa seems to pull that trick very well every once in a while. Not even Mama or Serena will know what might have happened until Papa has to explain it." Just then, out of instinct, I felt the need to dig. I began digging in random spots and found various things, all of which I either went to chewing on, or I simply ripped apart by shaking my head real fast. Every now and then, I would get spooked by the sound of the wind pushing up against one of the dead bushes around me, making me jerk my head up and quickly glance around with wide open eyes. Afterwards, I'd just go back to doing whatever I was doing. Bunny lowered her hands to put them together at her head's right side and said, "Aw, isn't he cute?" I was somehow spooked by her voice and quickly jerked my head up to look over, which she responded to by waving her right hand at me and happily called out, "Hi." I bent my ears back, spread my claws and dug them into the ground, while my hackles and tails spiked up. I also bared my teeth as I gave a very loud hiss. After that, I went back to what I was doing, while Bunny lowered her hands and said, "He's so cute." Her right eyebrow raised, Wolf said, "I didn't think foxes could hiss." "I've never hissed," Fox said, "but then again, I don't get angry much." Regaining their focus on me, the two Kexans turned to watch me very violently rip apart a skeleton, as Death said, "They don't. He's just being stupid." It's an outburst of uncollected thought being spit out of his mouth before his brain could process what it really wanted the tongue to say. I started to jolt to bash my head into some of the hills nearby, while Bunny became upset and said, "Aw, Papa's sad." "How can you tell?" Tak asked. "The guy looks nuts to me." "How long do you have to keep him tied down here like this?" "Well, eventually he should calm down and start actually listening to us. So until then, he can't go anywhere. The only way he can leave is by my rite of passage or..." Just then, having crushed a ribcage with my jaws, I did a special teleportation that quickly formed a black barrier around me. The barrier folded over me and made my body vanish as it closed in, then shrank itself into nothing. Very surprised at what he just saw, Tak continued, Teleportation by Dark Vanish." The Dark Vanish technique was one of Shadow's greatest powers. It had the ability to alter time and space slightly to the user's liking, while it took no energy to use. Seems easy enough. However, you needed a clear and focused mind in order to control it. A little difficult, but a mind clear on madness and focused on destruction works just as good. Everyone was surprised at what I had done, even speechless for a while. After a moment, Wolf quickly glanced around to try and find me, as she yelled, Where the hell did he go?" Calm to the situation, Bunny raised her hands up to her mouth and called out, "Papa!" "Ray!" Fox called out. As they called out to me a second time, Blight quickly yelled, "Get back here, you bastard! I'm gonna punch you!" "Impossible," Death said, lowering the barrier as he finally became shocked at what I had done. "No one's been able to use the Dark Vanish. It's too great and complicated of a technique. Shadow won't allow others to use it. If he can use it, even at this level, then he very well is the Endelment." "But he could be anywhere by now," Tak said, never being able to change back. I vanished from behind one of the hills nearby and reappeared behind the group. I then quickly lashed out one of my 8 tails now and struck Tack through the back of his heart. I raised Tack up as I struck Death with one tail into each of his knee joints, forcing him to brace himself on the ground with his hands and try to kneel down on his left leg. With the 2 Kexans in my brutal grasp, I viciously asked, "What's wrong? I thought you two were able to handle this." Wolf, Fox, and Bunny quickly turned around to see that I had grown twice in size from before, with the pupils of my eyes intensely shining blood red and all of my teeth now pitch black fangs. They tried to walk towards me, but were thwarted by one of Death's tails as he yelled, "Back away from him! There's nothing you can do at this stage. If he feels the slightest possible threat from you, he won't hesitate to kill you." "Shut up," I barked as I struck one of my tails to the center of his torso. "I'm going to make you suffer for hurting my daughter." I then struck another tail into Tack and slammed him into the ground and said, "I'll deal with you later." "Goodbye, folks," Blight said. "It was nice knowing you." He then jolted to fly away from the area, but of course, that didn't help since he just ended up repeating his flight pattern over and over again. After the 3rd time, he motioned back to Bunny and said, "Oh, hi. Fancy meeting you here." Tack was barely able to get out to the others. The only way to stop him is if he somehow transforms into his last stage and conquers Shadow's subconscious with his own. "Shut up," I yelled, raising the Kexan up again to slam him back down. I then raised Tack up one last time to toss him aside as I said, "Worthless." Tack slammed into one of the dirt hills nearby at my left, the hill caving in after the impact. I knocked the Kexan out, leaving me free to fight against his colleague. Death quickly went into his darkness form and tried to strike me with all 9 of his tails, but as he swung them around and turned towards me, I threw him up and ripped away my tails. My action thwarted the Kexans by forcing a large amount of pain to course within his body. He became paralyzed as he started to fall, yet I jumped up to catch him in my mouth and quickly shook my head viciously from side to side. I then tossed the Kexan up one last time and batted him with my tails over to where the other was. Bunny tried to stop me as she yelled, "Please, Papa, stop this now. This isn't you." "Shut up," I responded. I swung the same tail used to hit Death around once before, having it try to strike Bunny, but Wolf quickly changed into her full animal state and grabbed the end of the tail with her teeth just before it could reach. As she grabbed it, Fox changed into her full form as well and went to help hold down my tail, while they both snarled viciously and glared at me in anger. I stared down at Wolf with my insane grin and gave a sinister laugh, then said, "Not bad. Even though you know full well that you're outmatched, you still fight to protect your loved ones." They continued to hold down my tail as I slightly tried to move it and continued, "That's good. However," I quickly flung 4 of my tails over my back and struck 2 each into Wolf's and Fox's upper bodies. Both gave a quick, loud yelp, which I responded with, "It ain't that simple to be brave and protective to beat me." "Papa, stop, please." Ignoring what Bunny said, I raised both canines up about 20 feet, then quickly slammed them back down and made them yelp again. Bunny then continued, "Papa, no!" Death and Tack tried to attack me from behind, but were thwarted by my other tails. I laughed at their pitiful attempts, turning to watch them pointlessly fight off my tails to get to me. Wolf took that opportunity to turn her head slightly towards Bunny as she said, "Bunny, please, you're the only one here who can stop him at this point." The rabbit Alikins dropped to her knees as she cried and said, "How? He won't even listen to me, and I don't want to hurt him." Blight, with no intent or emotion, quickly said, "Well, that just sucks." "Don't worry," Fox said. "All you have to do is provoke him into his final stage." My tails that struck the canines raised them up again and slammed them back down to try and hush them, forcing them to yelp again. Trying to ignore the pain, Fox continued, "Once he's there, this should all end." Bunny sniffled as she wiped away her tears with her right hand and said, "Okay, I'll try." She stood up and charged a light blue energy blast, the size of a dodgeball, into her right hand and tossed it at the back of my head. I swiped away death intact, not even scratched by the blast, then turned to face Bunny as she said, "I'm sorry, Papa, but you've gone too far. I can't allow you to continue hurting Mama this way. So I'll say this one last time. Please, stop this at once before any more people get hurt. That being you from me." "Yeah," Blight barked, "you bastard." What was now no longer my voice, the fox gave a sinister chuckle as it slowly raised the 9th tail, body growing and changing into the original Shadow, with nothing from my own body left to control. Now in his own voice, Shadow said, "Too late." The 9th tail struck Bunny through her heart, then was jerked out as it ripped out her heart and blew it apart into nothing with a single shockwave. When she fell to her knees again, Shadow said, "Pathetic mortal. Did you honestly think that you, or any of your friends, could stop me from obtaining this man's impossibly strong body and soul?" He struck all 9 of his tails into her, then continued, "No, you couldn't, could you? Because like everyone else, you're nothing more than a weak and worthless mortal. Farewell." With that, Shadow quickly ripped out his tails from Bunny and reverted them back to their normal size, while also releasing Wolf and Fox as they laid unconscious. As the tails reverted, all I could hear was the sounds of Wolf yelping in pain from when one of the tails ripped away from her, as well as Bunny crying while she gave out her final breath to say, "Papa." For some reason, I thought I awoke back in the realm of gods, but it was just darkness. Total darkness. I couldn't believe I was there. Somehow I was standing up, while shocked as to what happened. I looked around and called out for anyone to help me, but no one answered. Just endless silence and total darkness. Darkness. I fell to my knees as I looked up to the sky, even though it too was darkness. Knowing what just happened, I couldn't hold it in. I cried. For the first time in my harsh long life, I cried. It was painful. I couldn't believe that I had just lost my friends, my family. I couldn't understand why. All I could think was, why wasn't I able to stop? What went wrong? I fell forward onto the ground, with the right side of my face on the floor. I just laid there, uncaring of what would happen next. I finally prayed to die, to have no existence anymore. After a minute, Khalida walked over and laid down beside me to nudge me a bit on my left shoulder with her snout. She then said, "Come now, Ray. You don't really think you've lost, do you?" Still crying, I said, "What do you think? I'm here, aren't I? That means Shadow won, and I've lost everything. My body will be destroyed, and my soul trapped here forever." Shadow laughed out loud in an echo, then took a deep breath and yelled, "That's right. I don't think being in the God realm will stop me. Your little friends will also be sent to darkness with you when your time there is up. There's nothing you can do now. It's over. I win." Khalida placed her right paw over my head to lightly pet me and said, "Please, Ray. You're the only one who can help them. If you don't, Dominic will win, and everything you've worked for will soon fall apart. We can't hold you here in our world for very long. Please, give it one last shot, for old time's sake." Just then, I remembered once again what Grandpa had told me. There is a time in life when you will have to make an impossible choice, even if that choice can only be led by hope. Never give up, never give in. Having thought that, I sniffled as I picked myself up and said, I will not give in. I will not lose. Ha! Shadow yelled. What are you gonna do, huh? You can't do anything. All you are now is a wandering soul. What can you possibly hope to do, huh? Yell at me? I laughed at that as I looked forward, then said, actually, yeah, that's exactly what I'm gonna do. Though I can't attack you physically, I can attack you subconsciously, just as Tax said. And that's where I win. Only I can control my body, and its true powers that it holds within. So as long as my subconscious can overpower you, which I know it can, you can't do anything to me. What? Impossible. You're bluffing. I raised my head slightly to look up and yelled, Give me back my body. No one else can have it. It's mine. I then channeled my energy and continued, It's my body. Give it back to me. Give it back. Amazingly, Shadow quickly appeared about 10 feet in front of me, confused and frightened out of his wits that I brought him back into his own world. I then raised both of my hands up at him, my palms facing out, as I took a step back to brace myself. It's over for you, Alanu. You'll never see Wolf, Bunny, or anyone else again. Your soul is now forfeit. Shadow gave a quick yelp in fear and yelled, What the hell? You can't take my soul. I'm a god. You're no god, I shouted, charging a blood-red energy blast in front of me with both of my hands that grew to be an 8-foot sphere with electricity swirling around it. You're just a prick that likes to fuck with people's minds. And this is where it ends. It's over. Before the blast was complete, Shadow tried to step away, but he found he was stuck and said, No, why can't I move? Khalida smiled at the fox and calmly said, So long, King of Darkness. I shot my blast at Shadow, where it instantly grew to be slightly bigger than the fox and completely obliterated the creature when it ignited upon impact. A pitch-black sphere of energy appeared in place of the fox, it being no bigger than the size of a golf ball, and floated in the center of the area. The sphere floated down to my eye level, where it just hovered in midair. As it did, Koju appeared and walked around next to his sister, avoiding the thing entirely. I looked over at the sphere, amazed, then glanced back over at the two wolves. When I did, Koju said, It's too bad you couldn't really kill him. However, taking his soul will not only render him powerless against you, it will also give you total control of all of his powers. Besides, it's not every day a mortal can house the soul of a god within himself. Khalida quickly looked at her brother, confused, and whispered, Do you know what that might actually do? Not even ancients could understand what might happen. Do you think he'll be able to contain it? Even as Kojo moved to rub up against his sister's left side affectionately with his right, while he interrupted with, You know, you are cute when you gently rub up against me. Khalida was a bit surprised at what her brother did, but then was peaceful as she rubbed up against him too, forgetting her question. As I turned to head for the sphere, Light's voice faded in and said, Be warned, my lord. No one has ever defeated my brother in this manner. It may be hard for you to control him as another spirit within you. So please, take the best of care and proceed with caution. I walked up and grabbed the sphere with my right hand, which gave me a light shock, then disappeared as I opened my hand to try and see it again. Afterwards, I lowered my hand and turned to look back at Koju and Kalita and said, "Thank you, Lord Koju. Thank you, Lady Kalita. And take care. I have one last thing to do before I can relax." The two wolves said their goodbyes, then I closed my eyes to try and remove myself from their realm. I opened my eyes again to find Bunny had just dropped to her knees and was about to lose her soul. Her spirit formed into a small sphere and began to float out of her mouth, but I quickly changed through my darkness form one last time into something that was somewhat normal to my liking. I jolted to grab Bunny's soul and her body from separating, then quickly placed it back into her by motioning it to where her heart should have been. As that happened, I used 7 of my 9 tails to gently puncture her back and help her body's regeneration, while the others were used to heal Wolf and Fox as they laid still. After I had healed them, I laid my daughter down with her head on her mother's body. I then turned around to face Death and Tack, who both stood with their jaws dropped and were completely shocked at what they just saw. Death cleared his throat and brushed off some dirt from his shoulders, acting as if nothing new had happened, while he said, "Impressive, Endelment." "Stop calling me that," I barked, using Shadow's voice and my own combined. "Be lucky that I don't rip your hearts out and feed them to you." Now, he said as he raised his hands up for a bit. "No need to be so violent." He then lowered his arms and continued, "But now that you've learned to control the darkness within you, might I suggest that you take this time to get to understand your newfound abilities more and learn to wield them properly." While also, Tack added, brushing some dirt off his body, "you should examine yourself to understand what you truly look like. You need to figure out what areas have or haven't improved, along with what you can now use to your advantage." I examined myself and noticed that I was in a form that was similar to an Alican's, but a few things that I had were a little different. For instance, my eyes were now black, with the pupils being white, and a blood-red ring around the pupil that was a centimeter big and a centimeter away. My 9 tails had finally stopped flailing around and had small strikes of red lightning that flew around them every now and then, with bits of my dark aura slightly flaring from them. My hair and fur were completely pitch black, as were my claws and fangs, but my other teeth were back to normal. I had somewhat large fox ears on my head, which increased my hearing by twice from what it was before. I also became a lot stronger, but my ability to run fast had been downsized because of my new ability to use Dark Vanish. My ability to see far off in the distance had been removed because of the ability to see energy readings, but that didn't bother me. I also had a strong and weird urge to be more wild, with the need to fight more than I did before. Another weird urge was to scratch myself like an animal. Other than that, I was my complete normal self again. At least, to me I was. After about another hour of constant training against 4 shadowy entities of my regular self, Wolf, Bunny, and Fox woke up to find me in my new form, fending off the shadow entities with ease. Once I saw them awake, I stopped playing around with the fakes and did one quick punch to the ground. My punch struck up a black spike for each entity that was 2 inches thick, obliterating them on impact. It was a hard technique to use, called Dark Rise, but it was one of Shadow's best as well. I stood up and calmly walked over to the 3 Alicans, watching as Bunny grew a big smile on her face. Then I said, "Sorry for the mess I had you guys go through." Bunny didn't say anything. Instead, she just ran up to me and gave me a big hug. Wolf changed back into her half state, along with Fox, and said, "Glad to see that you've learned to control darkness, my lord." "Please, Papa," Bunny cried as she held on to me. "Don't ever do that again. You scared the life out of me. I thought I might have lost you. I thought you left us for good." "Come on now, Bunny," I said, wrapping my arms around her. You know I won't ever leave you. Not as long as I never say goodbye. I'll always be here for you. I promise you that." She then started to shed peaceful tears as she nodded her head, unintentionally rubbing against my chest while keeping her grasp on me. Wolf calmly walked over and around me to examine my new form. Then when she was behind me, she slapped me across the back of my head with her left hand. Fox walked over, but didn't examine me, just slapped me across the face with her left hand. Wolf motioned to stand in front of me next to her friend and said, "I told you not to pull shit off like that again." I laughed at that, then said, "Sorry, Wolf. I didn't realize how out of control I was." Fox slapped me again, then I asked, "What was that for?" "My Wolfie. Deal with it." The Kexans laughed, then Tak said, "Alright, that's enough. If you're going to fight, don't do it here. I'd rather you deal with your personal problems on your own time, not mine." "Sure thing," Death said. He then tipped his hat again and said, "See you later, Endelment." The two Kexans teleported away, while the Nevada desert changed back into its normal state as the rainy storm reappeared. When it did, I thought, damn them, I'm not the Endelment. There's no such thing, and there's no possible reason to justify me as such. Power-hungry whores. With that in mind, that made me wonder, are they just using me to gain power for themselves? This concludes the reading of Chapter 15. Thank you all for watching and listening. If you like what you've seen and heard, there will be a link to my physical works in the description below. With that being said, stay safe, take care, and we'll see you again next week, reading Chapter 16.